Beach Planning Commission is now in order. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
By consensus? Okay. Is there a motion to, anybody else other than me have any corrections to the minutes?
I do.
Ma'am?
Okay, yeah. So I'm looking at page 4 of 5, and there's, the minutes provide a synopsis of various statements by planning commissioners. So I believe that several of the synopsises attributed to my comments don't accurately summarize what I said. So I'd just like to go down to the paragraph that starts, Kerr stated she finds the idea of workforce housing disingenuous. It wasn't the idea, it's the characterization. There's quite a big difference there. I don't find the idea of workforce housing disingenuous and would not have said that. But I find the characterization of this as workforce housing disingenuous. And the next one is that Kerr stated she takes offense to the decrease in off-street parking requirements. No, I didn't take offense to the decrease. I took offense to the idea that people who are part of the workforce don't need transportation like everybody else. There's a difference there. So I wasn't taking offense to the parking. It was offense, because how could you? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I was taking offense to the, does that make sense?
To the premise, maybe?
Right.
The-
The premise that people who are in
occupants of
workforce housing, that's the perfect word, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't need transportation just like everybody else. So that's the premise. And when you're ready, I have one more.
And I,
Should I go on? Oh, I have one more.
Hold on, we should
Everyone
catch up.
ready? Okay.
Okay.
And then finally, Kerr further stated disagreement with the provided parking studies. No, what I said was that the parking studies are not relevant to the situation in Cannon Beach because Seattle and San Diego are not comparable to our needs and issues in Cannon Beach. So that's different than saying that I just was in disagreement with the parking studies. What I specifically said, and I remember saying, was that I didn't think that those were appropriate models for Cannon Beach because Seattle and San Diego have very, very sophisticated public transportation systems.
Maybe disagreement with the relevance, or
We could say that, disagreement with the relevance of Seattle and San Diego's parking studies to a situation in Cannon Beach. That's better, it's shorter and nicer. What you just said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Darrell, you're up.
Yeah,
As soon as
so-
Alicia starts writing, I guess.
so in that same paragraph with Kerr stating that she,
Wait 1 second.
your second is up.
Kind of. Think you kind of
Okay. So in that same paragraph where it says Kerr stated she finds the idea, at the end of that paragraph, they're talking about me, he stated that he feels the housing study is wrong. I did not say it was wrong. I did say, though, that downtown parking is at a premium.
So if it's said it,
Crossing out that part.
he stated he feels that downtown parking is at a premium would capture it?
Yeah.
Okay, and for the record, I emailed Alicia and asked her to correct the vote on that, that it was unanimous, that I did vote in favor. And the copy you have in front of you reflects that. Okay, as corrected, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as corrected.
I second.
By consensus?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, moving ahead. hearing and consideration of V 18-01, request by James Adams and Terry Bird for variance to allow a two-story addition to a non-conforming structure located at 264 West Canal. I think I've got the wrong thing.
This is last month.
You got last,
That's
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading from the minutes, okay.
yeah.
Going back to, I was reading from the minutes, so I was reading an issue from last, it clearly didn't sound right. Okay. This is a quasi-judicial public hearing regarding the consideration of V 18-02, request by David Malesi. Right. Just by chance, for a variance to allow the partition of a 5,000 square foot lot located at 172 West Monroe. The applicant, David Malesi, is requesting a variance to allow the partition of a 5,000 square foot lot. The existing lot currently has two single-family dwellings owned separately, with the property being owned jointly as a tenancy in common agreement. The property is located at 172 West Monroe, tax lot 13400, map 51030AA, and in a residential medium-density R2 zone. The property is owned by David Malesi, Sarah B. Howell Trust, and Michael and Lola Gailey. Municipal Code Section 17.14.040.A, standards lot size requires a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. The request will be reviewed against the Municipal Code Section 17.84.030 variances, criteria for granting. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest?
I do.
Do you have an actual conflict of interest or just a
Well,
bias?
I sold I had the property listed when this all occurred. So even though it was a long time ago, I benefited from the sale. So financially, I feel I should recuse myself.
I agree that you should recuse yourself, but I would say, just sort of as a matter of precedent, my understanding of this is that you have a conflict of interest if you stand to make or lose some, you or a member of your immediate family stand to make or lose some money now.
Oh,
I think,
okay.
I think you should recuse yourself on the basis of bias, but not of conflict of interest. I don't think you have a conflict of interest.
Okay,
Okay,
all
thank
right.
you.
So
Anybody else? Does any commission member believe he or she has a personal bias other than Rob? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts? Has any commission member made a site visit? Yes. Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. So you have this very abbreviated staff report because the applicant had requested in writing to me in an email if you have a continuance. Well, earlier this week, the applicant came through with the survey data, which you have in front of you, 11 by 17 sheet, and then there's some email correspondence attached to that also that kind of gives you some information about the genesis of that. So I wanted to bring you up to speed on what's happened, and then you're going to have to make a decision about how you want to proceed. This is a just larger version of the same thing you have in front of you. That's what I'm using. So there's the 50 by 100 lot, there's the two houses. The yellow line on here is the partition line. Now, when you review partitions, and you do review them, I don't approve those administratively. I guess in an ideal world or a perfect world, you would have the variance and the partition in front of you at the same time. But there's no requirement that an applicant do that. They could do it serially to save themselves some costs, to kind of find out whether they're going to make it over the first threshold before they try to clear both hurdles. And in this case, that's what the applicant decided to do, see if they could get the variance before going to the extra expense on the partition. But I asked the applicant in those emails, you can see that, look, there's some other things we need to know about this partition before we really can fully act on the variance. For instance, there's a possibility that you could win approval of your lot size variance, only to find out later that you also need some other variances, depending on how this plays out. And so I'm not talking about the lot size variance so much here as the other issues that are in play. The lot size variance is fairly straightforward. It's a 5,000 square foot lot. They're proposing to divide it roughly in half. So that's fairly straightforward. The other things that come into play here are parking. There's inadequate parking for two dwellings now, inadequate off-street parking for two dwellings now, but if we do a partition, that is no longer a grandfathered situation and have to meet it. Each lot in a partition needs to have frontage on a public street. In this proposed partition, the rear lot doesn't have street frontage. It would rely on an access easement here. So there's another issue that would need to be addressed. When this line goes into the middle, this becomes the front yard for the rear dwelling, which needs to be 15 feet. That's fine the way they've drawn it, but the rear yard for the front dwelling also needs to be 15 feet. Well, you can see by this dimension, there's only 25 feet between the two, so there is not room for two 15-foot setbacks there. That's another element of this that is up in the air. Not directly related to the proposed lot size variance, but it's definitely going to be a consequence or something that's going to have to be addressed at time of a partition, which would be, if you did grant this, some subsequent hearing in front of you, probably in May at the earliest. So those are all kind of issues that are at play here. And I just wanted to bring this up, and I brought it up with the applicants, both in email and in a phone call, and then again in a meeting today, so that they can, if they can, address these with you, and if they can't, know what they're going to need to come back with at some future date, depending on the outcome here. So
And it also looks like the rear house is at one point touching the lot line.
yeah, it's tight to say the least back there. If that was the only issue, the position of the rear house is grandfathered with respect to that lot line. Nothing's changing back there, and that could go forward with that. But you're right, this property and the arrangement of houses is, I guess the bottom line is, it's non-conforming in many different ways. The lot size variance addresses one aspect of the proposed partition, but not these others. And I know that you know this, and I'm saying this partially for the benefit of the applicants. You know, there are many properties in Cannon Beach that are non-conforming in one respect or another. You see them all the time in front of you. That's really a lot of what you do, is dealing with non-conforming buildings and people who want to change something. You don't see all the conforming stuff because most of that stuff I handle administratively. It doesn't need to come to you. So I can understand where you might be left with the impression that this is a city of non-conforming buildings. That's not the case. You just see most of them. And this is just another example of those. This has aspects of other projects you've worked on, but they're all together here in one project. The lot size variance is one part of this, but it's not the whole thing. I guess that's the bottom line for me. So if, go ahead.
So then the house in the back, if this is divided, would that gravel driveway, would that be the access that they would have for cars?
Yeah, the way this is tentatively proposed is they'd have this access easement down that gravel driveway to reach the back house.
And would they provide any parking in the back area?
Well, we don't say here. The back house could theoretically park in the easement, and I would say that's fine because nobody else is using that easement. But that begs the question of where the people in the front house are going to park. If there's parking in the back for the back house, the front house people can't park in the easement because now they're blocking the back house. So there's a lot of unanswered questions about that parking arrangement. You've definitely raised one of them there. Without knowing exactly how that's going to be handled, well, we don't know exactly how that's going to be handled. You might discover that in a hearing, but right now you don't. Technically, that question's not in front of you, but it certainly may inform how you want to handle this, the thing that is in front of you, the lot size variance. So I would recommend that you go ahead and conduct the public hearing, and then you're going to have to either make a decision on the lot size variance, which is the only thing in front of you tonight, or if there's a reason to continue it to April. Like the two things I'd say is the The April hearing is 4/26, and if you get to that point, I can give you that date again. 120 days would run on June 5th. And this is subject to the 120-day requirement. If you were able to make a decision 4/26, we would still have enough time to meet that in the event of an appeal. So I think there is time to continue it if you get to that point. The partition itself would be a separate application subject to a separate 120 days, so that's not a factor here.
Okay, thank you. It just occurred to me that I hadn't muted my phone, so if anybody else hasn't, this would be a good time. I did. Okay, we got some additional correspondence, so I guess I don't need to ask about that. This is the call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the West Above. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code, which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant? Yes. You're up.
Good evening. My name is David Malesi. My current mailing address, my home address is 6425 34th Avenue, Northwest, Seattle, Washington, 98107. The applicant, and I am one of the owners of the North House. I own it together with my wife Carla and my wife Carla's sister Sarah Havel and her husband Ian Havel. Michael and Lola Gailey are here tonight. They own the South House. I guess to start, I just want to be clear that the purpose of going through this application process is to divide the lot into two separate tax parcels so that in the future, when we're ready, we would be able to sell them easily. I bought our house, the North House, in 2002, and we didn't have any kids down then, and we came down all the time. Now we've got a family, and we're going to sporting events all the time, so we're not coming down to Cannon Beach as much as we'd like to. And in about 2012, we tried to sell the property twice, we got no offers, and it was mainly because that there wasn't any financing available for buyers due to 2008 recession. But this isn't really all about us trying to sell our house. I feel like the houses in the West Presidential Streets are quite unique and really define the character of Cannon Beach. That they're small, they're old, historic. Our homes were probably built in the 1920s. They went under some remodeling, I believe around 2000, but the structures remain the same. And that's what I think of when I think of Cannon Beach. I see a lot of new homes going up around here, and they're massive homes. There's one being built right next to ours, and I think if you do think about the character of Cannon Beach, then granting this variance would actually help preserve some of that character. And I'd like to read a couple of things from the comprehensive plan. This is under your section of housing policies. The city shall preserve and enhance the qualities that contribute to the character and livability of its residential areas. And also the city will encourage the preservation of the older housing stock. So I believe that, by really granting this partition and with the current zoning codes in the city of Cannon Beach, even if someone were to buy our properties in the future, they wouldn't be able to build, massive new homes. So that being said, I'd like to address a little bit about with the site plan. Mark alluded to, what we are proposing to do. Certainly off-street parking, I've heard is an issue, but we could certainly address that with the new access easement to the north property. And if the spaces are 9 by 18, we certainly have that room in the front of the south house to run those parallel to West Monroe Street. So that, of course, is dependent upon the 25-foot of frontage that you're asking for both properties. So we would certainly ask for variance on that, and we would certainly still ask for the variance of the 15-foot rear setback on the south house. That's about it. That's what I have to say, so thank you very much.
Any questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you. Are there presentations by proponents? Sir?
Mrs. Ford, correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Gailey. We're here with my wife Lola. We own the house in front on the main street.
Address?
Pardon? Oh, the address is 13323 Southeast Regency View Drive, Happy Valley, Oregon, 97086. We own the house in front, and it's on the south side. I know there's a lot of variances being asked for to complete our request. Understand the history of these two homes, and I wish Patty and Patty were here. I think everybody must know who Pat and Patty are. They live on the corner of Monroe and Beachfront. They used to actually own these homes. It used to be a hotel, Holiday Inn. The house that we live in the front was the main house. The house that Dave and his family live in was one of the rooms. And the easement, the driveway, used to be 3 different cottages that were part of this Holiday Inn. Our house was a kid house built in 1925. I suspect theirs built about the same time. As Dave mentioned, Cannon Beach, what separates it from the other beach communities is the appearance of it. It's a small house. Their house is a small house. We keep it up. We keep the grass mowed. We keep the flowers growing. We try and tend to keep it so it looks like it belongs here. And we love Cannon Beach. We no intention of selling our house. Dave and Carla are in a different situation. They leave Seattle. They get here at Friday at 9 p.m. so that they can get home in time. They leave at 12 p.m. on Sunday. So they really put in a full day, maybe a half while they're here. The importance of separating the houses, so if they ever reach a point where they do want to sell it, that they can. As he's mentioned, he's put his on sale a couple of times, and he cannot get financing because of the fact of the way the property is situated. We ask that it be broken up basically in half, so that if that time comes where he does want to sell it, he can. We have no intention of selling our house. We want to pass it on to our children, our grandchildren. But being in a situation in the past, in my family, we don't want to hand them something that they will have trouble selling in the future, should they ever want to sell it. We'll never sell it. We love the house. We love Cannon Beach. We come down there as often as we can. And we think in keeping the house as it is and keeping the house in behind it adds to the ambiance of Cannon Beach. It's a small community, small homes, very community-oriented. As far as the parking and the discussion about we need parking, the way it's set up right now, we do park. Dave uses the driveway, and we have no problem with that. We park in front of our house. If we get down there and people are here for the holidays and they're parked in front of our house, we use the driveway. Again, no, we've never had any issue of that. So we understand there are a lot of variances being asked for, but what I'm basically trying to address is the fact that what you have is beautiful. We just want it divided so that it will be a separate entity that if we want to sell, we can. If they want to sell, they can. Again, we won't sell. We'll be here until our time comes. But so that's about all I have to say.
Okay. Any questions for this gentleman?
Could you tell me when this was turned into a single parcel and split into?
I might have to address Robin on that. Robin had sold Carla and Dave their house, and my wife's sister had bought our house at the same time. And in fact, we had Robin looking for us for a house too. My wife's sister decided they found another house in Cannon Beach to move to, so we bought it from her sister. But I'd refer you to Robin as far as to answer that question. She'd have a better answer than I would.
I'm willing to have Robin come up to
Okay.
the lectern. Does anyone else have any further questions first before this
I mean,
gentleman?
basically, the question I'm asking is when did it become a duplex?
Well, as far as it being a duplex, again, it's two separate entities. And they bought theirs in 2002, and we bought it in our portion in 2004, I believe. At the time we bought it, I didn't understand the way the property is set up, that there was an issue. In fact, the wife, who does most of the financial issues in the house, she didn't understand that either. And when we went in to refinance it, they turned us down initially to refinance because of the property. It's a joint property. And then she pointed out that where we were refinancing was the same ones that gave us the financing to begin with. So they said, okay, maybe they shouldn't have done that. We were totally unaware of the issue of that. I mean, maybe we should have been more aware, but we didn't realize it'd be an issue going forward with that.
Well, so how did it become it's sitting here now as a duplex? One lot, two units.
2 units, well, you could refer to it as a duplex, I suspect, but it is 2 separate living quarters and 2 separate families own. We own our house and they own their house, and we share the utilities. Maybe I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, is this one tax lot or 2 tax lots?
It's one, and we share all the billing and everything. And again, they're great neighbors. We really don't want to lose them ever, but we understand their plight too. I mean, for us, it's a 90-minute drive to get here. For them, it's quite an effort. So, and again, we're not saying that they're going to sell their house. That's not what the issue is. Our issue is that it's something we feel if we can take care of now, it'd be better for everybody in the future, and maybe even better for the city. They have 2 separate lots there.
Are you ready for him to sit down?
No,
Okay.
Answer my question.
No, I mean, I don't know how to answer the question there, so I apologize there.
Robin, can you contribute anything to this?
Well, I haven't prepared for this,
I understand.
so I apologize. But Robin Risley, 587 North Laurel. When the property was originally
Let me
purchased.
remind you the mailing address.
Oh, Post Office Box 950. Okay, so Judy Bartoni and Kathy Sanders purchased the property, and at that point, what they wanted to do was to have them be fractional ownerships. And so that was originally what they did. They owned the whole piece of property. And then what they did is they divided it in that. They still were one lot, but they could sell it to two individuals. And, you know, I don't know how that was approved. Maybe Mark would have an idea about that, but anyway, that was what happened at that time. And it was around 2000, I think. What do you think? Okay. That's when you bought it, though.
We bought ours in 2002, but Jim and...
And that was out when your sister bought it? Okay, then that's when it was.
Thank you. Any other proponents? You can come back, yes?
My address and everything again?
No.
Okay. I think part of the reason we were able to buy the homes at that time, if you remember back then, you could go out and buy 10 homes and get away with it. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but that's when you could buy a home left and right, whether you had a job or not. So banks were quick to write loans for homes without, looking at what they really were doing. That you want a home, you want money, here you go. So.
Thank you. Are there other proponents? Are there opponents? Is there a staff response?
I guess I should have said this earlier, that the city doesn't regulate fractional ownerships, tenants in common agreements, things like that, because they don't actually affect the physical characteristics of the property. So the form of ownership on the deed is not something we regulate. Nobody would need to ask me permission, and if they had, I would have just said it's none of our business on that part. So that certainly can be put into play without any interference from us.
So if you had two parties who own two houses together and they decided, okay, I'll take this house and you take that house, that wouldn't be the city's business.
Right.
It sounded like
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That would not be the city's business, how they divided that up, until they actually decided to deed them out separately and divide the land. Then it becomes something we
Then
can
we're here.
regulate. Yeah, that's why we're here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that was, in effect, the staff response.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Does the applicant wish to make additional statements?
No.
Okay. I have no reason to believe the hearing is being continued, so I am closing the public hearing and we move to consideration. Who has an opinion to express?
Well, I think there's a big elephant sitting on this, and that is that the comprehensive plan talks about this area being designated as an area for 50 by 100 foot lots, 5,000 square foot lots. And essentially, that was the reason for my question about this duplex arrangement. It seems to me that if somebody came with two 2,500 square foot lots and said to the planning commission, we'd like to turn this into one 5,000 lot and make it fit in with the comprehensive plans rule about this area of the city, and we wouldn't be having any argument here.
It wouldn't even come before you. I could
Yeah.
approve that administratively.
Exactly. And I hesitate to take a perfectly normal 50 by 100 foot lot and split it into two small lots, which is what I think we're trying to get away from as a city. And I think that that trumps, so to speak, all of the other assertions in the comprehensive plan about maintaining the feel of the city of Cannon Beach, or the size of the houses that used to be here, and so forth and so on. I think this is a piece of property that is probably worth less as 50 by 100 than if it were officially split into two and the city recognized it, and you could sell it to two people who wanted to remodel, rebuild, just buy, whatever, two houses. I mean, there's a financial gain to be made by making this split. And it goes beyond whether, Wells Fargo is going to give you a loan or not. So I think that's a real big push to get this, approved. Ms. Greens.
Are there other opinions to express?
I really understand the dilemma here. But by the same token, there's so many other, it's not just undersized lots, it's everything else. It's the parking, which I actually, it still would be a problem. You can't stack parking, so it would be a problem for both lots. It's a setback issue. I mean, there's just so many things. It's not just the one issue.
But those are, by comparison to taking a normal lot that fits the characteristics that the comprehensive plan calls for this area, those are minor problems by comparison to deciding, oh, well, we can just cut this in two, and, people can build a couple of cute little cabins, or we can remodel, or we can sell, or whatever, and make a good bit on the side as well, probably. But just the fact that it's in violation, to do this would be essentially saying we're going to go forward and look at the comprehensive plan and ignore what is supposed to be normal in this area. And I just don't think that's something we ought to be doing. And there are other ways, I think, of dealing with this. I mean, if one of the parties would like to buy the other party's property, which happens in partnerships in all kinds of ways, that could be done, and one of these houses could be rented out. And we need rental housing. We've heard that.
Any other observations? I have some things to say, but I'd rather hold them off.
I'm done.
Have a chance. Along with the other matters, my strongest consideration here, and I don't think it's one that bears directly, but it bears on the question of whether this is really going to go through as a whole, and that is having a frontage on a street. I think giving people permission to have a property that doesn't front on a street at all goes against a pretty strong requirement. And just saying, well, that I can see, okay, maybe there's a way to get around the parking, and we give people variances frequently about setbacks and so forth. But I don't remember ever having had a case where we said that somebody didn't need frontage on the street. Also, in reading, pardon me. In reading the reasons for wanting this, I had a thought that may be incorrect, but I'll put it out anyway. And that is, it seemed to me that probably anybody who was going to be looking to buy one of these houses was in most cases would be in one of two situations. One is they lived someplace else, and they wanted to move away from there and move into that house, and that's where they're going to live, and not a second home. In that case, I would expect that that's somebody who would be in the kind of situation that my wife and I were essentially when we bought our house, and that is, we had the money from selling the other house, and we bought the house here. The other case is somebody who lives someplace else, wants this as a second or third home. Probably they have their mortgage there either paid off or mostly paid off, and they could get a loan against that house. Obviously, that didn't work out in the case, when you were trying to sell it before. So I may be wrong, but it seems like you're not in a complete pickle. You're not going to be without potential buyers. So even that argument, I didn't find completely convincing. Does anyone have either further comments or a motion?
Accepting that, the fact that they were built in the early 20s or mid-20s, I would like to see them be able to retain that. And if they sell both of these houses, then you are looking at a much larger home potentially being built to all of the zoning rules on that lot.
Is that a statement in favor of approving this or in favor of disapproving?
Yes, I enjoy the character of Cannon Beach.
Sure.
I think these small homes
Sure.
have a lot to do with that character. And I think we're trying to maintain that. And if they tear these homes down at some point, then they have to build them.
But if it was two separate homes, they could still tear down the house and build a box. I mean,
Right, yeah.
whether it's on two lots or one big box or two small boxes.
I can interpret that as an argument in favor of approving, and I understand that if there are on separate lots, then probably the same owner is not going to own both of them. And if somebody builds and replaces one of the houses, it's still going to be a pretty small lot because it's going to have setbacks.
That's true, but I'm just saying it's not going to, if the argument in favor of this is that you're maintaining the character, there's nothing about it being two lots or one lot that assures you're going to maintain the character anyway.
Sure.
So I don't see how that is really a legitimate argument, because you can build an ugly house on a little lot too, so.
Well,
This is the nightmare no one would want to be in.
Well, I guess I'm now inviting a motion. I don't see any reason to believe that, in fact, I've already said, I don't see any reason to think that we're going to continue this, so I think we want to, if people want a little more time to think.
Are we able to address the,
Not at this time, no, that was closed.
Well, I move that we turn down this request for a variance.
Second it.
Okay. Is there further discussion at this time? Alicia?
Commissioner Johnson?
yes,
Commissioner Ridley?
Oh.
Commissioner Burke?
Yes?
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Patrick?
No.
Chair Lundy.
Yes. Okay, so that has been voted down.
I will get the order out on this tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. Oh. Okay, this is now a public hearing and consideration of, whoops, yes, okay. SR 18-01, a request by Mary Schlesser? Schessler. Oh, of course. For a setback reduction at 795 South Hemlock Street, map and tax lot 51030AD/1100. I think I'm not reading from the wrong paper.
Are you looking for the script?
That's probably, let me go. Thank you. The applicant, Mary Schessler, is requesting a setback reduction to permit a 4-foot side yard setback. Excuse me again. In conjunction with construction of a new 6-foot by 20-foot sunshade room over an existing porch. The property is located at 795 South Hemlock Street, tax lot 1100, map 51030AD, and in a residential medium-density R2 zone. The property is owned by Mary Schessler Living Trust. Municipal Code Section 17.14.040.B.4 standards requires a minimum 15-foot side yard setback on a corner lot. The request will be reviewed against the Municipal Code Section 17.64.010 setback reduction provisions established. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Does any commission member believe he or she has a personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts? Has any commission member made a site visit? Yes. Okay. Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. The request involves a corner lot, and as you recall, the corner lot setbacks are different from all other lots, that they're 15 feet on each of the two street sides, 5 feet on the non-two street sides, so you get some relief on the other dimensions, but on the long corner lot street side, you have 15 feet in addition to the short corner lot and street line side. So that proposed addition would be on the long street side, runs into that 15-foot setback. If this was an interior lot rather than a corner lot, this would not be an issue. The applicant's given you some photographs of the site. You can see where the deck is, so it tells you exactly where the proposed addition would be. The only thing I would point out is that one of the criteria here has to do with the percentage of building coverage, and I think that their calculation overlooked that shed, which is visible in the photographs and on their site plan. So I added those dimensions. That takes it up to 39% by my calculations, right at the edge of what you could allow on a setback reduction, but I've got no reason to believe those dimensions are wrong, so I'm feeling reasonably comfortable with that number. If you do get to an approval on this, this is even though I think they're talking about a kind of a prefabricated type sunroom or something like that, still requires a building permit, and in particular in this case, we're going to need some engineering or analysis to show that it can stand up on what was built as a deck, not built to accommodate a structure, possibly. That's not too big a deal. I'm saying that mostly for the benefit of the applicant in this case, because we would require that building permit, whether you added that as a condition or not. That's all I have for a staff report.
Okay. Is there any additional correspondence?
Didn't get any correspondence on this.
Okay. This is a call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the west door. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Yes, there is.
Ma'am?
My name's Mary Schessler. My mailing address is 3029 Southeast 43rd Avenue, Portland, Oregon. Thank you for hearing me. The reason I am asking for this request really goes back to the reason why there's a structure over the side door. If you've been to the lot, so you've seen that. I had that structure put up when the house was sited because I needed some protection from the weather. Being a south-facing house on Jackson Street, I get all of the weather coming up Hemlock right off the ocean. And so I hit the wind and the rain and hits that door, and it actually drives the water underneath the door sill. I think that's called the sill. So I wanted some protection against the weather. The current structure that's there provides me no protection from the weather. It's tall, there's no surround around it, so I still get all the wind and the rain. So it's inadequate. It's also unsightly. My neighbors are delightful, and they say to me, what is that thing there for? And you know it's ugly. And I say, yes, I'm really sorry about that, and it's on my list of things that I want to correct in the home. And now it's time for me to deal with that list. Also, I have a rather large deck, and one of the reasons I wanted to have kind of a roof over a portion of it is to take care of the profile issue. If you've seen the house, you know that that side of the house is absolutely flat. And I think that is unsightly. The one nice thing about having that little porch there is it does kind of break up the profile. However, it's inadequate. It also, on my deck, there's no privacy from the hotel, which is immediately across the street from me. There are benches right outside the doorways of the hotel, and people sit there like they should when it's sunny, and they're smoking, and their dogs are running, and that's fine, but it means that when I'm out on my deck, I'm kind of in their space and they're in mine. There's no visual barrier, there's no auditory barrier. We could carry on our conversations together from my deck to their bench. So what I'm looking for is another option to take care of the weather issues and deal with the privacy and deal with the profile of the house. I've looked at other options. I've looked at, I've had the table with the umbrella that got ripped off with the wind. I can't leave anything out on the porch because it gets blown away, no matter how heavy it is. I've looked at retractable awnings, but they will not work on my home. I need a 9-inch is on the wall to mount on the wall. There's not 9 inches because of the way the windows are placed. Also, I can't hang it from the eave because this is a manufactured home, and the studs don't go from the peak down to the eave. They go down from the peak to the edge of the house. Then the eave is more of a cosmetic thing. It doesn't really have the structural support that's needed for a retractable awning. I've also looked at some of the things that are available right now in Home Depot. They have those large 4 posts, and then they have sort of a canvas top. My concern with that is, again, I have the wind issue, and I think that that's not going to be stable there. So I've kind of come to the idea of a sunroom. A sunroom would provide weather protection from the wind, the rain, and also the sun, because when it is sunny, it's really sunny there. And I need some shade if I'm going to be out there on the deck. It also would increase the privacy, providing a visual barrier and an auditory barrier to increase privacy with the hotel across the street. It doesn't interfere with views from any other homes on the area in terms of trying to see down to the beach, because none of us can really see the beach unless you're in the middle of the street anyway. So, and it would be a low profile. It's a 6-foot extension, and it's right in the middle of the 100-foot stretch there on Jackson Street. The neighbors like the idea. I think mostly they like the idea that the old thing would be coming down and they wouldn't have to look at that anymore. So, but in addition, it would have a solid roof, and that would provide, it has the ability to accept solar panels, and I've been looking at adding solar panels to the house roof as it is, but this would be an addition, a possible addition to that. So that's really kind of my thought process as I've been working through this to come up with a plan that would improve that side of the house, both in terms of the look of the property, but also in terms of the functionality of that space. And I thank you for hearing my presentation.
So do you have solar panels on your house now?
I don't. It's one of the things that's on that list that I've been working on the house. It's one of the things I'm looking into and I'm investigating right now. I would like to do that. I've always wanted to have solar panels, and in looking at the pitch of the roof now, it's really ideal for solar panels. So that would be something I'd want to do in the next probably about 4 years out in terms of the cost and being able to manage the costs of those things.
So I'm having a hard time visualizing what this new unit is going to look like and how it's going to be attached to the house.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be attached to the side of the house. They would cut back that eave that's there currently and attach right to the side of the house. I have some pictures of similar kinds of sunrooms that you could take a look at. They're not exact. These come out of their, out of the company's. May I bring this to you?
Yeah.
This comes out of the company's literature. It would be something, similar to this.
So
Okay.
then the other thing was, somewhere I believe in this, you stated that the walls would be glass.
Yes.
So, I mean, in terms of privacy and that sort of thing, like.
Right, yeah, glass is, I mean, obviously it's transparent, but the thing with having, it does provide at least some barrier. Right now, there's virtually nothing between myself and the hotel. And having a little bit of a structure there would provide some visual barrier there, as well as the auditory barrier, so that because I wouldn't overhear their conversations and they wouldn't necessarily overhear mine.
And would there be where would the door be into this structure?
The door would be on the east side of the structure. So the structure would be solid on the west side, the 6-foot, the 20-foot here, and then this side, which would be the east side, would have a swing door on it.
I think that if you're enclosing the south side, it's going to get really hot. I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yes, thank you. And actually, the windows will open. So I can open them if I'm out there and it's really hot in the summer. But it can, if it's not warm, then I can keep the windows closed, and that protects from both the wind and the rain. Mr. Barnes, you did mention about how it would be fixed into the soil. It would have 18 by 18-inch concrete pier footings, I believe is what they're called. Right, and so the contractor would be putting those in underneath the deck, and then that would be the supports for the sunroom. So it is rated for over 100-mile-an-hour winds.
With the pitch on your roof that you have right now, will this follow that pitch line? And if so, how high will the exterior of the building that is the furthest?
Yeah, that's a good question. It won't follow exactly that pitch because it can't. You're right. Yeah, it's a more shallow pitch. And one of the reasons why we can't really go beyond 6 feet is if I would go beyond 6 feet out this way, it would bring it too low of the roof line. And I'm sorry, I don't have those exact figures in my head, but I have them here. I could look them up.
It looks in this photograph like you have a door in front of your door. It has a storm door.
I did.
I know I've got a south-facing door also, and we have a storm door on that is now keeping the rain from getting blown in.
Right.
You have an inadequate storm door?
No, I have a great storm door, and you're right. That has prevented the rain from coming in the bottom part of the door. But it doesn't provide any protection if you're standing out there waiting to come in, or if, as I'm moving in and out, it doesn't provide any protection from the weather. But you're right. I no longer have the problem with the water coming in underneath the door like I did before.
And I spent some time looking at your house from the front, but not from the back. Is there another door into the house that you?
No, there are.
That's a particular problem at that particular moment.
Well, there are two doors into the house. There's the one on the Hemlock side that's in underneath. There's a little covered porch on the Hemlock side. And there's a little bay window on the Hemlock side. And then the Jackson Street side is where this side door is.
Right.
And that's the door really that I come in and out of because it's the most convenient from the driveway area.
Okay, I can see in a different photograph, sort of a little porch around to the
Yeah,
side.
right, and it's underneath that porch that the front door is, which is the main entrance, but
I'm just
none of us ever use it.
At times when you've got a really heavy wind, you would not be getting quite so much,
Right.
so forceful on you if you just went in through the other entrance.
Yes, that's true.
And I didn't look at what the numbers were, but it looks as though if you put in some kind of porch or enclosure or something that was on the Jackson side, and that was compliant with the setback, it looks like maybe that could only come about 2 feet out from your house.
That's correct,
I
yeah.
thought of suggesting that notion, but I don't think that would do you much good.
Yeah, I probably couldn't get the door open in that instance, yeah.
So how much setback do you have between I guess it would be the north side of, the back side of the house?
The back side of the house, between the back side of the house and my neighbor, if you're looking on the north side, it's a 5-foot setback. And on the east side from the house, it's, I want to say it's about 25 feet. I'd have to look at that again to tell you
think you may have.
exactly. And then there's that little shed there. Yeah, it's on,
I guess it doesn't, it looks like it's probably more than 25.
it's possible, so I can't remember. I have
It's
that.
probably closer to 30, because
Yeah.
it's 15 feet off of Hemlock, and then there's a 56-foot long unit, and then that's a 100-foot lot.
I'm looking at that
Thank you.
sketch.
Yeah, yeah.
It's clearly more than twice the 12-foot,
One's-
Right.
It's probably,
25, yeah, 30, 35.
it's probably 30 feet,
Yeah.
because the 56 and the 15 add up to about 70, so it's probably 29 or 30 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there presentations by proponents? Are there presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
Nothing here.
And does the applicant wish to make additional statements?
No, thank you.
Okay. It doesn't appear that the hearing is being continued, so I close the public hearing and move to consideration. I think I'd like to hear some discussion before I invite a motion.
Asked her, how far is this deck out from the property line?
But
Do we have any?
Mark may be able to tell us, or some of these drawings may. It's certainly not very far, and it's not subject to a setback because it's not more than 30 inches. So I believe she could probably have it all the way to
When you can't have it to the property line.
the property line if she wanted to.
No, you couldn't. You'd have to be 2 feet from the property line.
Oh, okay.
But you can do it by adding up the numbers. It's 5 feet off of the back property line,
Oh, okay.
and flipping my way to that drawing.
14 feet depth of the house.
No, it's 20.
Oh, 14 feet there, 14 plus 14.
Yeah, so it's,
So it's 28, 33, 45, and it's 50-foot wide lot?
yeah, it's a 50-foot
Okay,
wide
so
lot.
it's 5 feet
Yeah,
to the deck.
5 feet from the deck edge to
From
the
the-
property line.
Yeah.
Roughly.
So this would make the structure 11 feet from the street,
From the property line,
from the property.
yeah.
Anybody want to make a statement why they think we should either approve or disapprove?
I just wish the structure she's proposing wasn't so stable. If you know what I mean. I mean, it's, I wish it was more,
Integrated into the building,
yes.
the house.
Mhm.
But with the roof line, I don't know how you're going to, without changing a roof line on a mobile home, how you're going to accomplish that.
Well,
I'm
I
not
mean,
a
we're not the
contractor,
design review board.
Done that.
One assurance I can give you is that I added a screened-in three-season room to a house in Appalachian, Ohio, where I lived for too long. And I put it on top of the deck that was mounted on top of concrete pillars. And it survived at least one tornado and was still functioning very well through a lot of big blows. Like the canyon. For 10 years that it was in the house before I sold the house. And so it'll work, I think. despite not, not really fitting to the house as well as it. My three-season room is in the back of the house, rather than the front of the house. So it's a bit different. If you need any assurance, it did work.
Well, are you talking about aesthetics, Norman?
Yes, and it's too close to the street. I'm just concerned about that.
Just because aesthetically, I think, I mean, to me, it looks better than what it is now. And of course, the ideal thing would be able to remodel that front, but that's really expensive. But this seems to be a solution to a problem that is affordable to them.
I would go with putting more plantings, but then it's, that's not mine to say.
Well, we have many houses in Cannon Beach that have less space between the street and the front of their house.
And I can see why you would want this protection to enter at the other, close to your driveway.
Well, there's so much space
Yes.
on the other side, on the Hemlock side. I mean, way more than needed. And so I mean, it seems, it's not like this house would be crowding the lot at all, because it seems that that the configuration of where the space is doesn't work out as, according, in the ideal way, but it's there.
It is, very definitely.
I feel like I'm being pushy, but I'm going to move that we approve this variance of that variance.
Is there a second? Okay. Any more discussion before we move to a vote? Okay, Alicia?
Commissioner Johnson?
No?
Commissioner Risley?
No.
Commissioner Byrne?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Patrick?
Yes.
Chair Lundy.
No.
Tie vote, so this fails.
How did we get a tie? Oh, because we're missing a yes.
3-3.
Okay, so that fails. So that's that, right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to prepare, ask you to sign a denial,
Yes,
prepare denial findings.
yes,
Okay, so those will go out tomorrow.
okay. Oh, okay. Next order of business is let's see. I know what it is. I may as well use the script. Is this is a legislative public hearing regarding consideration of ZO 18-04, City of Cannon Beach request for zoning ordinance text and map amendments in conjunction with the adoption of modified flood hazard determinations. The City of Cannon Beach is requesting zoning ordinance text and map amendments. The proposed amendments adopt revised flood hazard determinations, FHDs, affecting the flood insurance rate map, FIRM, by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The modified FHDs and revised FIRM will be effective June 20th, 2018. The revised FHDs will amend the zoning ordinance flood hazard overlay map. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Does any commission member believe he or she has a personal bias? Is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. This is a map amendment we've talked about. I've given you the heads up that this is coming your way, so it finally has made it to you. The city's updated its flood hazard maps periodically. I think the last one was in 2010. FEMA periodically updates these. It's usually based on better technology. In this case, they started with high-altitude aerial photographs. They went to satellite. Now we're at LiDAR. So this is kind of the latest and greatest in terms of horizontal and vertical imagery, and it allows them to make presumably more fine-grained decisions than they've been able to do in the past. That doesn't mean the maps are without error, but they're definitely a superior product to the ones we're using now and the ones we were using back when I started this business in 1978. So this is an evolution of that material. Most of the time, flood issues don't get to this planning commission because they're almost all handled administratively. Appeals, denials are rare because really there's almost no wiggle room. People are building a new home, they have to comply. When people are doing a remodel that passes 50% of the threshold, they have to comply. If they're below 50%, they don't have to comply. So there's a lot of administration of our flood hazard zone that goes on behind the scenes you never see because it just never gets to the planning commission in the form of a permit. But it is a big, complicated program, and that's just our side of it. There's also a whole insurance side of it. I don't know enough to speak intelligently about that, but I do know that it's important to people in Cannon Beach who own property in the flood zone because they're paying insurance premiums on it. So I can't answer questions about that. If you really want to go deep into the weeds on how this program works administratively, I'd be happy to do that. And it'll take some time, but I'm going to skip over that unless you tell me to. This is a legislative hearing. It's a zone map and zone text amendment. That means your action is a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council has this teed up for the May hearing. I'm going to ask you, and it's going to sound like I'm begging, because I am. If you can get this done tonight, you will be doing us, and I mean you and me, a big favor, because your April agenda is already very clogged up. And if you can't get this done tonight, you're probably looking at a double, 2 meetings in April. So if it's at all possible to get this done tonight, I think you'd be well served by doing that. There's a couple of other there's 3 other kind of extraneous issues here that are going to come up. One is, there's an article in the paper last night. Clatsop County held their hearings on their analog of this proposal, and it was somewhat controversial. There was quite a bit of testimony. I wasn't at that hearing. I did talk to the chairman of their planning commission, Bruce Francis, who's in the audience, and he was talking through with me some of the things that were controversial at that hearing, and I said, well, if they're controversial there, they may well be controversial here. I don't think they are. My understanding from talking to Bruce, reading the article, and comparing our text amendments with Clatsop County's text amendments is that the issues are somewhat different. And Clatsop County manages, they manage all aspects of the land use program differently than we do, but their flood-related stuff is managed on mostly a fee basis. That is, anytime staff there does a floodplain review of something, they're collecting a fee. And that's important because their program is mostly fee-supported. They don't use a lot of general fund monies for that. In Cannon Beach, by contrast, we are very lightly fee-supported. Fees support a small percentage of our overall program budget. Most of our support comes from the general fund. And in Cannon Beach, that means it mostly comes from room taxes. So I make decisions about floodplain review, and most people, other than Alicia and I, don't even know they've been made because I don't make people fill out an application and I don't charge them a fee. So it happens all the time, same as it does in Clatsop County. It's just that there's no paperwork and no fee associated with it most of the time. When I issue a building permit in a flood zone, I'm doing a floodplain review, but I don't charge an extra fee for that. So applicants for those permits, really don't even know I'm doing it. And there's no paper trail that says, oh yeah, I reviewed this guy's garage for flood roofing, $100 please. There's nothing like that here. It's just folded into our building permit program. it's covered by building permit fees or by the general fund. I believe that that was a source of some of the controversy of Clatsop County. Commissioner Risley sits on that planning commission. She may have some insight here and may want to correct or expand on that. So that's one issue that I don't think is in play here, because we're not changing our fees and we're not going to a fee-supported system on flood hazard or any other types of reviews that we do. There's also an issue, if you read those lengthy studies carefully or even flipped through them, there's a lot of interplay between discussions about the different floors of the building, the stories of the building, and what's covered, what's not, what you can do on the lower floor depending on the elevation. And without going too deep into the weeds here, the key thing for us is the elevation of the bottom of the joists that hold up the lowest floor of the house. So if you think of your ground floor here, there's 4 joists below it. What's this elevation relative to the flood elevation? And there's minimal vertical distances between those that have to be maintained to comply. And we have, when you're building a new house or a remodel in a flood zone, you're going to have a surveyor shoot those elevations, fill out a flood elevation certificate. And even though the terminology refers sometimes to floors, sometimes to joists, sometimes to lowest habitable floor, at the end of the day, we're just shooting those elevations, and the differences in terminology to some extent all just wash out. It's confusing. Maybe it's intentionally so. I don't know. But I guess I would urge you not to get hung up on that, because in practice, in terms of administration, it doesn't cause us any problems. The people who are shooting these elevations are licensed surveyors. They know exactly what they need to do. I'm looking for specific information on the form they're filling out. I'm just comparing numbers. So the terminology at the end of the day doesn't matter very often. So I wouldn't get hung up too much on the fact that they're using different phrases for what at the end of the day seem like the same thing. There is a email in your packet that we added from Dave Lenzner at Oregon Department of State Land Conservation and Development. There's 2 agencies involved in this. FEMA is one, Federal Emergency Management Agency. They're kind of at the root of all this, and they're the agency that kind of manages these maps, runs the insurance program, the federal involvement in it, and oversees our flood program. It's their forms that we're filling out on these projects. The state is also involved. Every state has a state agency that kind of gives us more direct assistance, and Dave Lenzner, who wrote this email of March 15th, is one of the 2 people at staff level I deal with all the time. The difference between them and FEMA, FEMA's offices are far away, the closest one's in Bothell, Washington. They don't come down here, probably unless there actually is a flood. They're not familiar with Cannon Beach, if they're not familiar with our ordinance, so I can get some advice from them, but it's often very generic advice about what the program allows nationally. Dave and his colleague Chris Shirley, on the other hand, are people that I can call. They understand Cannon Beach, they know exactly what our ordinance says because they got a copy in front of them. So it's a lot more direct and quicker response from DLCD. So when Dave knew that we were doing this adoption, he gave me some notes about what he thought needed to be corrected in our ordinance, and that's what you see there. For what it's, I generally agree with Dave's amendments. Those all make sense. The stuff about historic structures doesn't come into play often here in Cannon Beach, but certainly may in the future as our buildings age and people get them on the National Register. The last issue I wanted to bring up is these 2 fat study volumes. These things, there's volume 1 and volume 2. That literally is part of the background report that I will be asking the City Council to adopt. I looked at those. I'm not going to say that I read every word of them. I flipped through them and went to the presentations when they first came out. Even though the date says June 20th, 2018, these were actually released 2 years ago. And so I'm familiar with them. I don't think there's anything that I really want to draw your attention to in there. Interestingly, Cola Creek is not listed as one of the creeks they did a flood study on, and that's why the study ends before you get very far up in Cola Creek. And that kind of makes sense from a resources point of view. There's no insured property as you go up in Cola Creek. You're you're going into the ECFR. The flood insurance program doesn't insure damage to land, damage to trees. It insures damage to structures, and there really aren't any insurable structures up in the Ecola Creek floodway. So they stopped the study where they need to stop it. It made sense. Otherwise, I don't have anything remarkable to point out about them. Those maps in the back are long 11 by 17. Behind you on the wall, I printed them out full size. The ones on the top are the new ones that we're being asked to adopt. The ones on the bottom are the current ones. And if you kind of go between them, you can see the differences as they play out. Those literally are the official maps. The paper versions of these are still the official maps. In this modern era, nobody uses those on a day-to-day basis. These are all digitized, and we rely on GIS to actually, when you're trying to make a determination on a specific lot as to what the flood hazard is there, how much of it's in and out of the flood zone, relying on those is pretty difficult, although for many years that's what we did rely on, was paper maps. So day-to-day we rely on the electronic version of these maps. As people, when these notices went out, as people called me and asked, how does this play out on my property, I relied on the electronic versions to give them kind of a before and after comparison. Everybody that asked about it, I provided that comparison. I don't know how many of them I did, but lots. They were also, many people were able to do this themselves. The county's website, the county agreed to host our map data in addition to theirs, so it's very easy to go to. If you're familiar with the county's website, quite a few people are, you can go there and do kind of a current and proposed mapping of your particular lot and see how it plays out. So a lot of people I never even talked to about this. I think I've said before that almost all of the changes are to the benefit of property owners here. If you compare those maps, the big changes downtown, all of downtown comes out of the flood zone. That means from a regulatory point of view that if a building is substantially remodeled or replaced downtown today, I would apply flood standards to it. They'd have to comply in terms of elevation and in terms of flood venting and some other requirements. If this gets adopted on June 20th, that would no longer be the case. The apartments, the Sea Lark Apartments, which you heard a parking variance on 2 months ago, is case in point. That's in the floodplain, and if they apply for a building permit on that if I issue a building permit on that before June 20th, then it'll have to be subject to the current flood restrictions. If the building permit is issued after June 20th, then it will not be subject to these restrictions. So that's kind of a prime example of the change that would be wrought in downtown.
What caused that change?
My understanding is that it's just better data. The LiDAR data gives them a far more fine-grained look at the changes in elevation on the town. When they had the previous data, which was based on satellite and aerial photography imagery, it had a much larger error bar. So say it's accurate to plus or minus 5%. Well, that 5% all goes in favor of flood risk. So even though you might literally be outside of the flood risk, if you're within 5% of the flood risk, they mapped you as part of the flood risk. It's just the LiDAR gives them finer grained data, and based on that data and analysis, they decided downtown was not subject to that 100-year floodplain.
And the determination of the 100-year floodplain excludes unusual tidal activity?
It includes predicted tidal activity, but it does not include tsunamis or sea level rise. Well, I shouldn't say that. It does include sea level rise, but not, there's no understanding that these maps are going to be accommodating 30 years of sea level rise, or perhaps even 10 years of sea level rise. The maps will likely be updated in smaller increments than you would notice sea level rise.
So when the big one hits tomorrow afternoon,
that will exceed the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah, it could.
It'll be up to the blue line.
Yeah.
So where does that leave a person who has a business downtown?
They, from an insurance point of view, they either have flood insurance or they don't have flood insurance. Right now, their mortgage holder, in all likelihood, requires that they have flood insurance, and if you're a business owner, prudence may require you to have flood insurance. If you decide to drop your flood insurance because you're no longer in the floodplain, then you won't have insurance that would cover flood damage. And that doesn't, outside of the floodplain doesn't mean you're immune from flood damage. It means you're immune from the 1 in 100 chance annually of flood damage based on a statistical model. So
Mark, isn't there a cap, though, on how much is
Yeah, that's-
insured? So if you're in FEMA insurance land, then it's $250?
I don't know.
And then
500.
500?
The most you can get on a building is 500,000.
So if you don't have to have that now, you could go to Lords of London and get as much as you want.
Yeah, people outside the
So it
floodplain
frees
can
you up
and do
to-
get flood insurance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not, you aren't unable to get flood insurance once you're out of the floodplain. Generally, it would cost less, but all of downtown would not be generally required to have flood insurance as a condition of their mortgage, say.
Right.
And without going deep into the weeds on floodplain management, that's really all I have in the way of a staff report.
Before we go forward from here, I've got a question. I sent to Mark and Alicia a list of questions and
Yeah.
edits and so forth. Can you identify which of those can't just be handled administratively as typos?
These can all be, I should have mentioned this.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing on your list that causes problems.
Okay,
It can all
thank
be
you.
handled.
Including the date kind of thing?
Yes,
Or-
it can all
Okay.
be handled either
That's
administratively
reassuring.
at the
Thank you.
city
I don't-
council level, or you can incorporate it into your
I-
motion, either way.
Okay, if it's handled administratively, that's fine. I didn't
Okay.
just want to wake up 6 months from now or whatever and say, oh, those are still in there.
Well, and I did go through them, I want to make sure, I mean, they all make sense when you read them, but that doesn't mean that there's some term of art there that has to match up exactly, and I don't think any of these are that case. I think these are all
I didn't think so. Okay, thank you.
changes that we can make
Okay.
without disturbing anything, and they make sense.
Thank you. Okay, finally moving ahead, thank you. I have the right one here? Yes. Any additional correspondence beyond what we've already got?
You have an email from Steve Sinkler in front
Yes,
of you.
it was here.
That's it.
Call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the west door. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Okay, since it's the city, we don't have an applicant. We've, in effect, got that in the staff report. Are there presentations by proponents of the request?
I am Mary Ann Sinkler, mailing address is P.O. Box 995. Stephen and I own a building downtown Cannon Beach, and so I just want to touch on the insurance issue so that you understand the financial impact that it has on, I don't know how many people, but I can only share what it's impacting, how it's impacting us. I contacted our insurance agent and told him about the new flood maps and asked what the difference in the premiums would be. And we're a mortgage holder, so we're required to have the insurance. And he said about $9,000 is what we'll save. So per year, yes, thank you for that. So when we bought the building in 2016, we were told, because the maps had already been approved at that time, that they would be implemented by 17, and we would have enjoyed that savings at that time. But here we are in 2018, and they haven't been implemented yet. So again, I'm not sure how many buildings would be impacted in the new turquoise color that is not highlighted in the lower maps, but I suspect that there's a pretty fair financial impact going on to the citizens of Cannon Beach without this implementation. So,
Any
questions?
for Ms. Sinclair? Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know whether you've seen it, but in our packet here someplace, there's pages and pages and pages of lists of properties that will not have to, be required to pay, to have that insurance that are now, and there are about somewhere in the order of a dozen that would go from not required now to being required. So
right, so a dozen times potentially 9,000 or more, so it's a good chunk of change. We'd be happy.
Are there other proponents?
Frank Patrick, 255 Northwest Torrey View Drive, Portland, Oregon. I'm here to talk about this, the practical reality of it. There's nothing about this insurance change that changes the ability to get insurance. It does not change the risk or the hazard of any building that's in any of these zones, whether they're flood zones or tsunami zones or otherwise. The big problem is that as long as this continues to go the way it's been, unless you folks should change it so the city council can change it, the person who wants to buy insurance is forced to buy FEMA insurance instead of commercial insurance. That's one of the problems. The second problem is if you have a mortgage that requires insurance and you are in a flood zone that's designated a flood zone by the error in the maps, and trust me, the errors are incredible, okay, then what happens? They're forced to buy FEMA insurance, which is, quite candidly, very, very expensive. When we did the entire evaluation for the FEMA buildings, this happens to be for the FEMA, those buildings are in the FEMA flood zone. We only have 2, and there were just portions of those 2. I spent, starting 8 years ago, 3 years to understand the rules and the regulations. And I'm actually a pretty fast reader. And when I got on the phone and talked to the mortgage companies, it was clear that none of the mortgage companies understood any of this stuff. And what they did is they just rubber stamped whatever somebody at some bank had said. And finally, when we got a hold of FEMA, the FEMA says, "This is crazy. These maps are all wrong. We know they're all wrong, and we're going to change the maps. Just be patient. But in the meantime, you still have to carry the FEMA required insurance." It's taken an incredible amount of time to get the banks to understand this. This has got nothing to do with the value of your insurance. It just has to do with how much you pay for it. And we now have much better insurance at lower rates for all the buildings that are covered. So I highly encourage you to do this. If there's some compelling reason that someone thinks, oh no, this is a bad idea, please ask, because I've spent hours on this crazy project, and Bruce has even spent more in the last 2 years.
I may have misunderstood something that you said, but I can tell you from my own limited experience, I'm not required to have flood insurance, but I chose to get FEMA flood insurance, and it was not nearly as expensive as somebody that's in the inundation zone there. And you and I were here several months ago when I think another resident of
Yes.
Was saying that you could get non-FEMA insurance, and I've looked into that, but I haven't moved ahead on it. My flood insurance agent has basically said, yes, I think there's a way that I can do that, but I haven't checked that out. But apparently, you can if you push into it.
It's an issue of obfuscation, and I'm not sure that it's FEMA that's obfuscating it or some of the insurance companies, but the story just hasn't got out. We used to believe the only place you could get flood insurance was from FEMA. If you're not in a FEMA flood zone, that isn't true. And the other thing that's very important is when you get out of the FEMA flood zones, you can get insurance that coordinates so that if it's land movement, if any of you remember the tsunamis that wiped over Japan, a lot of the insurance didn't cover because it was the type of insurance that didn't have a coordination of benefits. And as a result of that, if you didn't have subsidence and you didn't have flood and you didn't have earthquake, oh, well, I'm sorry, that was an earthquake, or no, that was a subsidence. So it was just a way that the insurance company plays the game. We have very good insurance now, Yeah, I'd be happy to get you the name. I can't tell you off the top of my head, maybe Bruce can. But we spent a lot of time searching this out, and
I got his
it's great.
name from the gentleman who I think was the man who was here earlier, although I don't remember for sure.
Oh, it has to be Scott.
Oh, okay, in any event, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
He
it.
was smarter than I. He figured it out. I didn't get it figured out.
And as I said, I talked to a different man who was,
Okay.
we don't need to take people's time.
Any other question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or, thank you. Other proponents? Carmen?
Carmen Swigert, P.O. Box 214, Cannon Beach. I did what my predecessors have explained to you. I have been paying for FEMA insurance for years, and the rates are atrocious, and sometimes I don't even know if something happens, if they will ever help me. No, that's a very sad situation, where you keep paying for this insurance and don't even know if you are really protected in situations, because like the gentleman before me said, they will give you one excuse or another one. So due to this financial hardship that we have been subject to, I really recommend you please to go far, to go and approve this. Another thing is, I don't even know if I will be affected in my insurance in the way that it says, but that's another case. I think that you need to pass this. Okay? Thank you very much for listening to me. Bye-bye.
Any questions for Carmen? Thank you. Any other proponents? Bruce?
Bruce Francis, P.O. Box 246, Cannon Beach, Oregon, 97110. As you all know, I've been pushing this issue for a lot of years here now. I'm pretty sure you're sick of seeing me come up here and complain about this.
I was going to mention that.
I know. That's why I got in first. But anyway, I'm very happy that we've got to this point, because as the previous testimony and as Mark has said to you, this is a big change for many of the residents here. Remember that the system we're under now is flawed. Now, FEMA may not say to you this is flawed, but the fact that they contracted with Dagami to overfly the state and produce these new maps and give us this new information, which those of us who've been sitting around here for 40 years watching what's going on concur with the latest updated information. It makes sense. So all I've got to say is please pass this tonight and get the recommendation through to the council, because we have limited time. If this is not adopted and in force by the May meeting, it will not make the June 20th deadline, and national flood insurance policies will be cancelled or could be, I won't say would be, could be cancelled by FEMA. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Francis? Thank you.
I did have the information if you wanted to know, but Robert can tell you what happened.
It was a lot different meeting up there. Very.
Oh, I'm going to do something that's slightly out of order. Carmen, it sounded as though you were saying that you don't know whether your status will be changed by this. Did I understand you correctly? Okay, if you want to stick around after the meeting, I've got the list of the changes. I'd be happy to lend that to you in the next however long it takes. Okay.
Excuse me, if we're going to have more discussion, I would ask that we have a 5-minute break.
Sure. Okay. Take a brief break.
Thank you. Well, you're all good. I'm not going to.
Hey, neighbor. Howdy, how are you?
That's just that, the big building.
Similar, but not as, I've had a couple moments of, I had a very specific take
I agree with you. Oh, no, they completely oblivious. I've got one flat down there. It says it's- several parcels that have done. I'll send you the bill. That's okay.
I manage the property. It's very much math to figure out how many years you can $15,000 before you reach it.
Didn't have enough time, yeah. Pardon me?
Mark, am I going to need this for anything?
No. Yeah, you're probably just going to have to scan the list and find them.
I don't, if I need that back, I'll pay that back.
That would be amazing if you got back. Yeah, I didn't know. He was suddenly unemployed there. We had surgery. He's recovering from that. He was back at
Yeah,
work.
he was fine.
Yeah, so I'm.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, well, he's still doing, he's an arborist, and he, Alicia came with him today, and he's got some reports queued up, so he's still, he hasn't moved out of the area. He's still working, so, but beyond that, I don't know. I talked to him on the phone on Friday. I didn't know this was coming down, he didn't mention a thing. Yeah, I called him at the county on it, maybe it was, a brief conversation on something else, he didn't mention it. So, yeah, I don't know what happened.
I wrote him an email. Are you still there? I never got an answer.
I think the answer was he's not.
Right.
Yeah. I have his other email if you want to just talk to him.
Probably reach out.
Okay. I have his personal email.
Yeah, I would like to, I really.
I'll send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Just want to, because I really thought the world of it.
Yeah, I like him. He's a smart guy.
Okay, let's come back to order. Are there other proponents?
Good evening. My name is Stephen Sinkler, and I'm at P.O. Box 995, Cannon Beach. You heard from my wife earlier. I wanted to first thank Mark Barnes for the work that he's done to keep this on track. And when Marianne and I bought our property, there was some dispute on what FEMA zone, flood zone we were in, and there was a dispute, and conflicting maps, and we met with Mark, and we had some fortuitous timing that we had the FEMA zone director here and in Seaside with the big FEMA flood zone meeting, and Mark and Marianne and I met with the FEMA flood zone commander and kind of sorted that out right at the time that we were buying our property. But what's clear is that this is really important to business owners, and it's important to the community as well, and it's important to the city. There was a comment earlier about the technology. The technology has improved to determine flood zoning and elevations. And there was a comment that it was faulty earlier. I don't know if the technology was faulty. I think the technology has just improved, and so they're able to get more accurate data than what they had before. And if you were at that Seaside flood zone meeting, they started with the technology, the mapping very fuzzy, and they brought it into very sharp, and they were showing you the change in technology and how the change in technology was allowing them to be much more pinpoint, much more accurate with the data than they had been earlier back to the 1970s. I was reading the email that was sent from Dave Lenzer to the city managers, dated December 29th. And if you haven't had a chance to look at this, I think it's important for the city, and I think it's important for this committee, and Mark referred to the timing earlier of June 20th. It has to be implemented by June 20th, and that means it has to be voted on 30 days before that. That's why he doesn't want you to kick the can down 30 days from this meeting, because he's under a time crunch and the city's under a time crunch to get this in place by June 20th. Because if it's not, only bad things happen. Nothing good happens. If you look at page 2, the first thing says adopting flood hazard map. I'm looking at the first bullet point. You're basically out of compliance. The city's out of compliance with FEMA regulations if this isn't implemented by June 20th. What happens then? The community is suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program. Not Stephen Sinclair, not Marianne Sinclair, not Breakers Point, the community. So every property that's even in Zone X, AE, VE, you can look at the map. I'm trying to get too deep into it, but every single property owner that has flood zone insurance is out of compliance. And we're suspended. It doesn't say maybe, it says the community is immediately suspended. Not might be, not maybe, is. Commissioner Kerr, you're a lawyer. You know what that word means.
I think
right?
We get this, yeah.
No,
I mean, not,
right.
we understand what you're
No, I understand, but sometimes I know that I see preparation levels are different. This is important. This is important, and so I'm calling it out. I'm calling it out to you. The last thing here, if flooding occurs, it's possible that the local government could be held liable. This is important. So what I'm asking you to do is take care of this issue today, don't kick it down the road, and vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Any questions for Steve? Thank you. Other proponents? Any opponents? Glad to see that. I'm glad that the questions that we had, I was prepared for a lot of people to making arrangements. Where am I? Okay, there I am. Is there a staff summary or response?
When I asked you to try to do this in a one-and-done manner tonight, I was kind of half joking, and I don't want you to think that I'm trying to stampede you to a decision. If you're not ready to make a decision tonight, schedule an extra meeting and tell me what you need to get to a comfort level on this, because I would rather you take the extra time and make the correct decision and feel like you're knowing what you're voting on than feel like I just stampeded you forward.
Tell me the option.
Yeah.
But there are 2 towns in Oregon that do not participate in national flood insurance. They're in eastern Oregon. They have a small amount of flood-prone property, but they they do not participate, that means they can't get flood insurance. That means when there's a flood disaster there, they get no assistance from the feds and by extension, the state, so.
They're too busy taking over wildlife areas.
Well, I don't know the exact circumstances. I suspect that there's only a handful of structures involved and those owners aren't interested. They're not places that have
And they may
flying
also,
rivers.
they may be able to get the other insurance that
They might,
Patrick was
yeah,
mentioning,
I don't.
and I've had initial discussions with my agent.
The point I'm trying to make is that I don't know how many cities, local governments there are in Oregon, there's only 2 that don't do it, so it's rare. And yes, you have an option of not participating. Nobody on the city council has told me they want to explore that option.
We may want to watch Warrenton.
Warrenton would be the one place where they really have some problems related to their levies. And my understanding from talking to my colleague there is that they've mostly kind of worked around those. They still have some big issues, but they've worked around the worst of that and have a solution that seems like the city's going to buy off on. We'll see.
That's big.
Yeah. Rural Clatsop County sounds like they have some issues they're going to have to get over.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Are there any additional presentations? Okay. As far as I can see, this is not being continued. So I'm closing the public hearing and moving to consideration. Anybody up here have something to say on the subject?
I think it'll be really hard to, it's going to really affect real estate purchases in areas like that. Everywhere, like Steve was saying, unless we go forward.
I think we need to go forward on it also.
I agree. I think we should just have a motion and do it.
Okay, we have a motion.
I move that we adopt the new flood ordinance. You know, I don't, say it. Go on, say it for me.
The
updated
The updated maps.
application
I move that we adopt them.
is requesting that we approve the request, the city's request.
Yes, I move that we approve the city's request and adopt the new FEMA floodplain map.
I would interpret this as first a recommendation to
Yes.
the city council that they adopt them, and then secondly, that it
Right.
includes that, the email that Bob meant, that put in with some grammatical changes, that we would incorporate those into the draft I showed the city council.
What he said.
Thank you.
I move that.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion before we vote? Alicia?
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes?
Commissioner Risley?
Yes.
Commissioner Byrne?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes?
Commissioner Patrick?
Yes.
Chair Lundy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Dig around in here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce, for all your hard work.
Yes.
It's only been 5 years, it was nothing.
Hey, don't run away.
I will be
We're
back.
going to talk about dune management,
Yeah, right.
although probably not very much. Okay, next. This is a continuation of a legislative public hearing regarding consideration of ZO 18-01 and CP 18-01 for dune management plan amendments. I'm going to, for the benefit of the three of you, I will say, this is probably not going to be really long, but I think I need to go through all of this boilerplate. City of Cannon Beach request for zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan text amendments updating the city's for dune management plan. The zoning ordinance text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of the Municipal Code, Section 17.86.070.a. Amendments criteria. The comprehensive plan amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of statewide planning goal 18. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Okay. I don't think, if we get to any substantive discussion, I'll ask you to stand down. But, let the record show that Ms. Patrick has said that, yes, she does have a conflict of interest. Does any commission member believe he or she has a personal bias? Is there a staff report at this time?
Same as last month, I still don't have Dr. Allen's final product. I would ask that you continue this to April 26th.
Okay, so we now have an official participant request for it.
And then we'd have to leave the public comment open too, because
Yes.
they haven't seen the
Yes,
final.
I
Right.
agree.
Yeah,
We want to do
absolutely,
that,
yeah.
yes.
And same understanding as last month, assuming I get this document in a timely manner, I will send it out to you as soon as I can and post it on the website.
Thank you.
May I ask what his problem is?
He had some surgery that was done, and he's trying to catch up. He has some
Okay,
health medical
that's-
problems he's
that's
trying to get past.
understandable.
Emergency behind his back surgery. He's recovering, but he's...
No, well, good, but I totally, a good reason.
Is there any additional correspondence?
Nothing new.
Okay. This is a call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the west door. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan and municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Are there presentations by proponents of the request? Are there presentations by opponents of the request? Is there a staff summary or response? Are there any additional presentations? Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Dan?
So when you say public comment remains open, is that written and oral?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once we've got the final, the revisions from Dr. Allen, and those have been made available publicly, there may very well be new public comments that people want to make both in writing and orally. So I would definitely, even if nobody was pushing me to, I would say I really think we need to have. The hearing is being continued, so we're not going to close this. And remind me what the date is. That probably
April
needs to go into
26th.
the record.
4/26.
4/26. Okay.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Before we had asked if all of the study could be done so that the changes are in italic or color or something.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sorry. but
No, I've asked him for that.
But we would really, it would make it so much easier to get it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, if those are truly minor changes, it would save people from having to plow through the whole thing again.
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, I brought so much paper up here that I've lost my agenda, but we have a tree report. Does anybody have anything to say about that? Okay.
We get the chair authorized to sign the orders?
I hope so, because I already did. Is there a motion to approve by signing the orders? No
I'll make
motion?
a motion to approve your sign.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take about what I hope is 1 minute and go to the order to bring something up that occurred to me. I'm not going to push it at all, but just as a notion. I was anticipating that we might well have a lot of people here who wanted to say overlapping things, and I'm sure that we will in the future. And it occurred to me, I sent an email to the Clatsop County Emergency Council, I don't remember what, anyway, commission, whatever they're called, inquiring about getting a bunch of the plastic cards that they have set up for people to put in their window in case of an emergency that either says, that says okay on one side and help on the other, that we could make available to people to hold up. If the green side, if they agreed, and the red side, if they didn't, it would give people a way to express where they stood on things without having to interfere with the flow of the meeting. The advantage to the emergency management people is that if we did that, I would explain to people that these were actually intended for them to have in near their front window to put in there in case of an emergency, to say whether they needed help, and that this would be a way for the emergency people to get these out into more people's homes. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea, but I may bring it up sometime again.
In the big city, they use a can of spray paint.
What's that?
In the big city, they use a can of spray paint.
And a lot of other places. But if you just say, this is lessons from.
Bob, I'm totally in the dark about what you're talking about.
I should have brought mine with me.
It's some kind of a card, but
it's
what does that have to do with overlapping comments?
My first thought was to borrow some of the I agree, I disagree things from Indivisible that we've been taking to the legislators' town meetings, and I thought that would understandably give a feeling of partisanship in the direction of
You mean
Indivisible.
in an audience here? Where? Because you can't, there's no record of it, Jen.
No, I meant if I were, I thought of calling up somebody from Indivisible and saying, could we borrow 50 of your cards for tonight?
Oh.
That was where that came from.
Oh, for the Dune discussion, or except that you couldn't really do that because you have to have a record of how people have to be able to say
You would not,
things.
I mean, if you do that, we wouldn't be recording that.
Right.
Most people wouldn't become parties by virtue of holding up a card.
No, but they could be parties by signing in on the sign-up sheet, which you offered to have.
Yeah, that's a way of doing it.
It would mean they could be parties by signing in, and they could express their opinions, and they, have the satisfaction of being seen, being part of a sea of green or of red.
People want to hear themselves talk if we never would.
No, I want to hear them talk.
Okay.
I'm serious.
Good. We can forget about that. Thank you.
No, really, they'd be so disappointed.
Thank you very much. Okay.
I have something else to do
Yes.
with the order. Okay, this is about the Nicholson property.
Yes.
And I've been over to look at it, and I've been wondering about it, and I now have a list of the criteria that the City Council approved the Nicholson property. There was a list of a bunch of criteria that had to be met in order for this to go forward. And it seems to me that one of them was that I believe that the living wall, was to be planted within 6 weeks, and they were supposed to be established within a year of being built,
That sounds right.
and that has not happened.
Okay.
So
So
what
what
is-
recourse
what-
do we have?
What happens now? I mean, if they're not in
Yeah.
compliance with what they were supposed to do, is it just like, well, so what? I mean, there has to be some recourse.
We have a number of enforcement methods. I haven't talked to Bruce, who was here earlier, about what we want to do there. Our choices are, we can have bond there. We can go after the bond if they're not performing. We can
Well, how long has it been?
A year.
It's been, what, a year and a half now,
Yeah,
something like
it's
that.
been longer than a year.
Yeah. We can go in and do it ourselves and lien the property. We can hold up building permits for any of the houses until that's done. So we have a number of levers we can use. I just don't know what the,
Can I just read number 17 on the list of criteria? It says, before permits for the driveway retaining wall are approved, the applicant shall provide to the city an executed contract with a landscape professional responsible for the installation and maintenance of plant materials on the wall and shall provide a timeline for the establishment of plantings on the wall. And is there a landscape professional who did this?
there was a contract and they didn't follow through on it.
Well, it wasn't, but that person wasn't even licensed in the state of, in Cannon Beach, that professional at the time. It was some guy from out of town.
Well,
So-
plenty of people from out of town have licenses.
Right,
He
but
might not
this
have,
person
yeah.
didn't, so, and there was just an unsigned estimate. No real professional landscape plan. So, I don't understand, why the city hasn't taken action at this point, a year and a half later.
It seems to me that this is part of a more general compliance issue, and maybe that's something that we need to, not necessarily as the commission, but maybe as individuals, or maybe even as the commission, talk to the city council about setting up mechanism.
I think the city was looking at getting a compliance officer.
Yeah, where do we stand with that?
That's likely to be in the proposed budget, some code enforcement. This planning commission is actually scheduled to go to work with the council at their May 8th meeting. They're having joint meetings with each of their different boards and commissions, and yours is scheduled for May 8th. That's still tentative, but pencil it in, don't ink it in, but yeah, we'll talk about that before we get there, but that would be an opportunity to bring up this kind of an issue.
Yeah, because, all those criteria become meaningless if he's not being held to them, and it's just a constant source of frustration for me every time I drive by there.
Plus, some branches have been cut on that big tree again.
Oh, yes, that was another thing.
Yeah,
There's a tree that has been, it
Couple
seems to me,
weeks ago.
improperly pruned.
yes.
A very large tree that was supposed to be okay, left in good condition.
That was the one close to the street?
Yes,
On the
yes, and
east side of the
someone's gone
property.
in there and cut branches on that. And I know I keep coming back to this and I keep
I
harping on it,
appreciate
but,
that you are.
I agree.
well, thank you.
Thank you.
But I'm still frustrated.
Well, but I think Bob's got a good point. We need to suggest to the council that they put some teeth in things.
Well, it's potential to earn money towards workforce housing by their fine.
Good point, right. The fine could go towards workforce housing.
Yeah, when I was talking about code enforcement, I don't know whether there's been any actual movement. I'm pretty sure that I mentioned to you, and I mentioned to some of the city councilors and whatnot, that we ought to be moving more actively as far as enforcement of short-term housing, licensing, and fees, whatever you call it.
Oh, that would bring money to the
Money's collection. Yeah.
There's some work on that front too. We're looking at bringing an outside service in for some compliance monitoring on short-term rental licenses.
Because if they're not enforced, then people are going to just do what
Yeah.
they want. And what's the whole point of trying to have a code and trying to,
Anybody else?
So no, I'm not ready to leave this. So what is this next step on this then, on the Nicholson thing?
Well, the city, me and the city manager need to make a decision about how he wants to direct me to go forward on enforcement.
Will you address it with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have talked about this, although I kind of gave him fire hose of information when he came
Tom
through
is a
here.
real nasty lady, he's just telling you.
I'll blame it on you guys.
Okay.
Great.
Well, I can be nasty about this, too.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, it's on our agenda, and I will bring it up.
Yeah, you should, if you have a chance, you should get here, you drive by. It's pretty amazing.
It looks like just a big dump pile.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And the wall looks like, I won't use an expletive in a meeting, public meeting, but it looks bad.
Yes.
Okay. We're adjourned.